All right, so if you are on quill.org, are you guys, sorry, I forgot to ask this question up front. Are you guys at Google Classroom School? Do you have your students in Google Classroom at all?
No.
Okay, great. So we'll go over classroom setup just to start out. But before we even get into classroom setup, so if you're there, go ahead and leave it.
You cut out on us. I'm not sure if it's us or you.
You hear me all right now?
Yeah.
Okay. So right now what you're doing is you are going to the URL I just highlighted. Let me make it a little bigger. Okay, so if you can see right here, this is the URL. I want you to go ahead and type into your browser, goo.gl/9, 8, a little h, a little n, a big B, and a little e. Once you get to that page, you're going to see this, and you're going to enter your name. Doesn't have to be your full name. It can be an alias if you want. I'll never know. And then you're going to press join. And I will know that you've joined. Oh, Tina's here. Hi, Tina.
Hi.
And am I going to, let's see if I pronounce this right. Vian?
Jan. Hello.
Jan. Whoa, so much better than either one of the ways I pronounced it. And Chrisanne?
Yep.
Hi. Sherry. Hi, Sherry.
Hello.
Seth?
Seth.
Seth. All right.
I called that all through.
Listen, I grew up in Virginia. I forgot that sometimes we put in the extra vowel just to make sure people elongated appropriately. Belinda. Hi, Belinda.
HN.
Am I waiting for anyone else to join?
Yes.
Let's see.
Yes, we've got a couple there. Okay.
Okey-doke.
All right.
Hi, Barb.
Okay, it looks like
I already logged in, Sherry.
about everybody.
All right, awesome. So what you should be seeing on your screen right now is...
Sorry.
What you should be seeing on your screen right now is this first slide. And what this is and what I've decided we would start with today is actually walking straight into Quill lessons. When I look down at your screen, it looks like some of you have already gotten started with Quill. Belinda, it looks like you've got a class set up. Christiane, it looks like you've tried it out a little bit. Kelly, it looks like you've got kids really working on it, and Sherry, you too. Mary, looks like you've got a class set up, and Vianne, it looks like you've got a little bit going on there too. So this is pretty exciting to see where you guys are starting. What I wanted to do is start you out with Quill lessons and walk you through that, because I think that this is going to be a tool that's really helpful to you. Plus, this is the most interactive part, so I figure it's great to start here. So what you've seen on your screen is the student page. Students would not log in the way you just did. They would just sign in and be able to join the lesson right from their account. What you can see now on my screen that I've just pulled up is you can see the teacher view, right? I can see which students are there. I can see some notes on the lesson right over here, and I can see what slides I have to go through. Now there's a third version of this. Now this version can be a little complicated, so if you go ahead and try this, you want a little extra help, you can always let me know. We have a projector mode. The reason for this is we know you don't want to share your students' answers with them at all times, so we have a version that can show up on your board, right? What this does is it means that if I want to go ahead and unmirror my screen, right? So if you have trouble with that, let me know. I can take this and I can drag it so that it is projected, and all that my students see is this projection. Then on my screen that only I can see, I can actually see all of the information that the teachers need.
Okay,
this one,
yeah. Because I have, oh my gosh, there's an echo. I have that going on my screen, so I'm going to show them real quick on my screen how it's working, because you're projected in a different screen than what I'm using to do my work. Okay.
That's amazing. I'm excited you can show them the unmirror. Go for it.
So this is my desktop with all my tabs open, but that is what is projected. Okay, and if you see my mouse is right here. My mouse is not on my screen right now. It's actually like over here. Okay, so I can pull it back over here, and now it's on my screen where I can use it. So this is like a split screen view, and this does take a little bit to set up. So if you ever, I can help too, and it sounds like Becca can help you too if you contact her about setting up the projector.
Yeah.
Okay.
The first time it's complicated. After that, it's pretty simple and straightforward. So, yeah, that's definitely resources you have for help. And then if you didn't see when I first launched the projector view, we have some guides right here that will teach you how to do it, just in case you want to look at it that way. Okay. All right, so here's my first slide that students are on. They've all joined my class. I'm going to start out by telling them what our objective is for today, right? I can walk through here. I've got a little script here on the side. This was designed for folks like in my first year of teaching when I'd never been taught grammar before. This was a tool that had sort of a step-by-step lesson I could go through. You can also hide that lesson if it's not something that you want to focus on. If you are like I was in my last year of teaching, when I would read through something and then I would teach it however the heck I wanted. So you can see here, Quill lessons go along with some sort of skill that we know students need to focus on, right? So conjunctions of time, using the words after, until, before, etc., right? So it's going to walk them through just a quick mini lesson on what that topic is. And then it's going to give students a chance to answer. Now, if you're looking at your screens, what just happened, let me see. What just happened is you got the option to type something in, okay? So what I want you to do is go ahead and type something in. It can be total gobbledygook. It can be your real answer to the question. It can be something sassy, whatever you choose. Once you've typed it in, you can press submit.
So this is what's going to be up on your computer. There is a joint which is right there. This is the mode, launch projector.
All right, so I can see these answers coming in right now.
So I would drag it so it's like a dual screen. Yeah, but you have to set it up like that. That's how we have our computer and TV at home. You can drag things from the computer desktop to the TV. Dual.
So as I can see these coming in, I can say to the students, thanks so much for that. Chrisanne, Barb, I really appreciate it. Now, if you guys will just look real quick, my friend Belinda is doing a great job of playing around right now. And she said, the teacher said to, right? If I had $1 for every time I got an answer like that, I would be a rich, rich woman. So when I see an answer like this gives me a chance to, without pointing anything out too widely, without making a big deal of it, to just point your screen at the room for a second, I'm going to press this button that says have students retry. Now that I've pressed that button, if you in the screen, it's gone blank and she now has to resubmit her answer. So I can say, hey, Belinda, I'd really love it if you thought that through and gave that a second try, right? So now she is forced to go back and try that answer for a second time. Okay, so we've got a couple answers here. Before we go too much further, I want to show you what we can do with these answers. I now have the opportunity to select and display answers, right? So I'm seeing Tina here. She's actually written a really beautiful sentence, right? Sherry's got something good things going on. And Chrisanne, you're great, but I'm going to choose Barb for this one, and I'm going to go ahead and display these here. Now, if you look at your screen, you will see that these 3 answers popped up on your screen. Right? You can't answer anything right now. You will see your answer if you submitted one, and then you can see these 3 sentences. Notice
Okay, so
go ahead.
Beyond sent her answer before she was ready. So could you send it back to her?
Yeah, absolutely. Hold on one second. Beyond sent her answer. I don't seem to have Beyond's answer here.
Okay,
It came back.
Okay, so what happened was rather than once you display the answers, that freezes all the other student screens so they can't submit. So yeah, so that's what happens is if you're in the process of writing, And Beyond, I'm actually really curious about this. Did it erase your answer, or when I undisplayed, did you have a chance to continue writing on the same answer?
Continue. It was still there.
Perfect. Great. So let's go ahead I'm going to go ahead and display again. Don't worry if it freezes you out. I want to model this for you real quick. So if you can see here, right on your page, you'll see the class. You've got 3 answers. The numbers exist so that you can cross-reference with who wrote them. So I can say Tina had a really great answer. She's number 3. But it doesn't have to correspond to the student, right? So none of the students know who's given each answer, right? Now, this gives us an amazing opportunity to have a discussion about these different questions and come up with sort of some ideas, right? If I scroll down in my lesson plan here, I can ask some questions, right? So we've read the responses aloud. We're going to ask, okay, how, why, what do you mean by? Here are some ideas, and then here are some examples of things I expect folks to say, right? Now, if you're me, you're probably going to look through this and immediately have a couple questions you want to ask students, some ideas of things you want them to compare and contrast, whatever else it is. But there are just some suggestions here from us either way. Now, one of the coolest stories I've heard about the use of Quill lessons so far is, and you'll see this with some later questions, students actually have the opportunity to, they submit an answer based on like actually writing a sentence. So I have heard teachers say that because the students were so excited to see better answers to the question, that they then wanted the opportunity, and you could press retry, and every student got the opportunity to retry and submit a better sentence. I know not every student will be that excited to do it twice, but it was something we were really proud and excited to hear. So now, if I look at these answers, maybe I see a couple students here who I want to flag because I want to talk to them later on, right? Maybe I'm a little concerned about their answer. Maybe they seem to get part of it, but not the whole idea. So I can flag those students and keep track of them as I go, right? So if I look up here, I can see Barb and Sherry have been flagged, so maybe when we start on the next example, I'll check in with them. Another feature here we have is the teacher model, right? You can change both the prompt, right? So I can say the Earth's crust moves, an earthquake occurs in California, right? So I can change whatever else. Then when I write my model, you'll see on your screen, it shows up there. The Earth's crust moves, so before an earthquake occurs in California, right? Can anyone identify one error I made in writing out this sentence?
California should be capital.
California needs to be capitalized. Great. So, and then we have a chance here, because I'm doing this in front of the class, I can say, yes, let's remember, I've been noticing we aren't always capitalizing our proper nouns, right? And we can say things like, would I put a comma in here? Because it seems to me like maybe one would go here. And then we can talk to the students about why I would or would not put a comma there, okay? So this gives you the opportunity to sort of have the conversation with the students and do the I do of the teacher lesson. Okay, you'll see here there are some more individual practices. Right here, the students are actually writing their own sentences. This is one of the cases where Quill doesn't auto-grade, and that's because we want this to be a discussion opportunity for you and your students, and not for you guys, and not for us to grade and give you sort of what we think students are doing. Once again, the big purpose of lessons is we know that once you start to have conversations about these skills, it has a much deeper impact than it would if you were just generally, sort of having the students work on the activities, right? So I'm going to move forward. Sorry to those of you who haven't had a chance to answer yet, but you can see how this works. When we get to the end of the lesson, I can see all of my students here, right? So maybe after talking to Barb, she got it right the next time, but Becca and James and this girl, I was worried, right? So I'm going to flag them because I want to make sure to talk to them. Now, you can't see this on your version, so I'm going to just show you in the screenshots that we have. The last page of the lesson, got a little bigger. You will have the option of doing a few things. Now that I've flagged my students, what I can do is click on small group instruction and independent practice. What that means these four students will get a blue screen that will say, "Hold tight, your teacher will be with you in a minute." And I can say to my students, everyone with the blue screen, come join me over here, and we're going to walk through a couple extra questions together before you get started. Every other student who's been assigned to the independent practice will be pushed into an aligned activity. That means that they will immediately get the opportunity to practice that skill. You can also say, we're going to not practice it now, but I want to assign it anyways, or we can say no follow-up practice. We're going to leave this skill where it is, right? So this is a pretty great tool in terms of having those discussions. You'll get a report afterwards that shares all those student answers with you, and also reminds you who's flagged so that you can keep track of the students who you know are struggling. Just a couple last things that I really love here. So you can always download a lesson, right? You can download a lesson plan. When you assign a lesson to students, it will actually email you a lesson plan that you can download and use there. I can see which students are flagged. And watch your screens real quick. This is a fun one. Say you were in a class discussion and then I needed to bring everyone back together. I press the watch teacher and all of your screens are going to change to get you to look up at me right now. Okay. Now, the last thing is, and this is super exciting, Quill, oh, I'm not signed in right now, so I can't do it. Quill now has the ability to customize lessons. So you can go through and change every single slide in this presentation to match the sort of things that you want to share with your students. So more than just changing the examples, you can change the sentences students are combining, you can change the objectives, you can have it match the language that you use in your school, however you choose to adapt. So we're pretty excited about lessons. We've gotten some really strong and powerful feedback from teachers about the difference it makes in terms of students retaining the skills that they're practicing. What questions do you have for me about Quill lessons?
Does anybody have any questions?
Can you ask her about creating the same, do kids need multiple accounts if they start using this in different classes?
Mm-hmm.
But it's good.
Yeah, like, so
go
we have like a remediation period during the day, which is like a half an hour, which Quill would be great for. But if they're already using it in their language arts class, we don't want them repeating lessons, or, you know, we kind of want to work on them through different angles, like through different opportunities for this. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. So here's the thing that's a little tricky about Quill. Because all of the content sort of overlaps no matter what class you're in, I recommend sort of a one student with all teachers on the same class. Now that's going to do a couple things. It's going to allow you sort of the visibility of what your teachers are doing in other rooms, right? If this student has already done this lesson, that's going to show up for me, right? So if I look here under manage, under classes and manage classes, we just, and we're super excited about this, made it possible for you to have co-teachers. So what I would recommend is say that you have, do your classes travel together? Or are they a little different?
No, they each have their own schedules, so they're not necessarily in the same classes.
Okay, so what I might recommend is just sharing anyone who teaches that student, share that class, right? So what you're going to do then is you're going to say that these teachers can co-teach in this area. That's one way to do it, is just adding co-teachers so you can see what's been assigned and what's been done. Another option in terms of that would just be to sort of break up what kind of things those teachers are working on, right? Right now, we don't have a way of showing you exactly what students have done outside of what you've assigned. That's one of my goals in terms of things that we will build out on our platform. But in terms of what you can see and what you can do with teachers is to say, in my class, we will do grammar activities exclusively, or in my class, we are doing X reports, right? So your two options here are co-teaching and or just sort of sharing across the board if there are lessons that you've done. The other thing is, and I'll repeat this about 1,000,000 times, it's not going to hurt your students to repeat activities. The nice thing about Quill activities is you can give slightly different answers each time. So say I've done the lesson in one class and then I'm doing it again in remediation, I'm going to have something new to contribute to the conversation. right? And if I'm doing a Quill Connect activity that I've done before in another class, that's just going to give me the opportunity to write better sentences the second time around, right? So one of the biggest things there just comes to framing for your students, right? If we tell students it's an error that they're having to do it twice, then they treat it like it's a frustrating task. When I've been in schools where they've said, you will do some activities in both classes, and that's because it's doubly important that you practice it, and you have the opportunity to do new things each time you answer Quill questions. And that's, because it's not multiple choice, that's the truth. We found that in those cases, kids actually really take up that challenge and do better work in each class, right? So it's an interesting way for you to see how things work. It is a little trickier, and that is a case that I don't think we've worked out quite yet, is what to do. So I'm writing down questions for myself. What do we do when a student travels, has an individual schedule,
So good classes.
and is using Quill in multiple classes? So we'll look into that a little bit for you. Okay, questions before I move on?
One thing I've noticed when I'm working in Quill is I get a little overwhelmed with like how many places the information is.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes, it does. So here's one of the interesting things. So you're mainly talking about, I imagine, is it the reports or the assigning where you get a little confused?
But mostly the assignments.
Okay, great. Yeah, so the assignments are not my favorite. So I didn't get to tell you guys any of my background. Before I joined Quill, I actually was a coach. I coached teachers across the city in using different ed tech tools. And as a former writing teacher, I worked with a lot of writing teachers. And this was the tool that I found that I liked the most in terms of sort of the activities it gave students to work on things. As someone who was a user first, there are things that I love and there are things that I'm pushing for us to improve. So whenever you guys share these ideas, these are things that I can absolutely talk to folks about and see if we can make a difference. The main thing that I would say in terms of when you are looking at the things you've assigned is just pay attention to the My Activity Packs page, right? So if I can scroll here, I can see each one of the different things that have been assigned. Now, if I've assigned students recommendations, there are going to be 10 different activity packs that show up for me right off the bat, right? That always is going to be a little tricky when you look at it because it's hard to tell who's been assigned what. But I would also rely a lot on this very top line. How many students has it been assigned to? How many different classes? And that's going to help me to know sort of where I am in terms of kids who've been asked to do these assignments. Now, one piece of feedback that we've gotten a few times and that's really important to me is that right now we don't have a clear way for you to know if you've assigned students something before. So you have to do a little relying on students in that case. But here's where I can show you what is the easiest way to see what students have been assigned. So under student reports, if you go to visual overview, you can see anything that students have been assigned right here, right? So I can see exactly what has been assigned. It's gray because the student hasn't completed it. So if the student says to you, you assigned me time conjunctions twice, right? If I look through here real quick, I only see time conjunctions once, right? So student Becca, you're wrong, right? You have this assignment once, you can work on that, right? So for the most part, I would use the number one report that I use is the visual overview because I think it is the simplest way to see what students have. I hope that answers your question. And if you have any other ideas for how we could make that easier to see, this is a pretty difficult, like in terms of the user experience, it's pretty difficult to model this, as you might have noticed if you've worked on other websites. So I would say that if you have a website that does this really well, that you really like, please let us know because we're always looking to update sort of how you see and do things. Questions? Okay, so let's go back real quick. We talked through Quill lessons. I want to go over the class setup real quick. Is there anyone in the room who needs support with setting up their classes? Just give me a number of folks.
Anybody?
I've already got mine assigned.
Everybody seems to be pretty comfortable with that.
Well, I can figure it out.
Great. So that's a great segue into, this is my email address right here. I'm highlighting it for you, becca@quill.org. It's pretty simple and straightforward. As one of our premium schools, we want to make sure that you have all the support you need. So you always have the widget in the corner. And yes, that's my face, and I'm the annoying Clippy that pops up on your screen. But you can also sort of click over here or start a new conversation and ask for help, and that'll be one of my teammates, right? If you're looking for, you've got a very specific question, you want to talk to me because it was something I mentioned, you can always email me at becca@quill.org, and I will respond to you as quickly as possible, or I will pass it off to someone who can respond to you as quickly as possible. So just make sure that you are considering those resources. So if you are setting up classes and you end up with questions, just reach out to us and let us know. Okay. So we're going to jump into Quill Connect real quick. I just want you guys to have a chance to see the tool in action. Let's start with the easy one. We've got these Quill Connect activities, and the reason I was really drawn to Quill is because of Quill Connect. Now, the way this tool is designed is to support the idea of sentence combining. Is that a strategy that you all focus on?
Well, yeah, at this point, they need to be writing the complex sentences, so we need to make sure that they know how to combine them so they become more.
Right. Right. Well, and that's the big deal. And what has been found, Quill is a really strong research-based tool, right? And one of the things that I think is greatest is that the research is based on like all these years of different people like Steve Graham and Bruce, I always forget, Bruce Sadler and a few others. And basically what they found was sentence combining was the #1 way to improve student writing, right? So the idea of what choices do I make when I write a sentence to effectively show the relationship between my ideas, right? So we either have these short staccato sentences, we have sentence fragments, we have run-on sentences, or we have students who don't use any conjunctions but and, right? Those are the different things that we see most commonly in writing. When students work on Quill Connect and on sentence combining, they are learning about the choices that they are making and how to properly use different conjunctions to join and combine ideas. So we try to keep the Quill Connect pretty simple up front. Rather than getting into the jargon, we try to focus on examples, okay? With this lesson, can anyone start out by giving me a wrong example? Give me a wrong example of how you would combine these two sentences.
Bats can fly, they have wings.
Bats can fly, but they have wings. Or bats have wings.
We can change up the order a little bit.
They have wings.
Right.
Okay. So the first thing it's going to do is it's going to ask me which joining word helps, right? Okay. So but doesn't work. I'm going to do the thing that kids do next, and I'm going to use the and. We're going to be... Okay, so it's going to tell me why. In most cases, if I use and, it's going to highlight that and makes sense, but isn't the best combining word, right? So we could say bats can fly, so they have wings, right? And let's go ahead and update the punctuation here. Okay, so now it's telling me as I go the different ways that I can change around the sentence so that it makes sense. Right, and what it's going to do is it's first going to try to focus on the order, and then it's going to try to focus on the spelling and punctuation. Now, the way Quill sentences are built it's pretty interesting. We actually have a group of folks that sort of write out these things, and then people will submit. We have crazy people on the internet who will submit 100 different answers, and then from those answers, we have a team that will actually tailor feedback to those answers that they see. So what we can see here is that there's basically only one correct answer. So we're going to see that here. And then next to that, we're going to see what, the students wrote. Okay, so let me go ahead and do one that is a little different. So this is where it gets really exciting for me, and this is what my teachers enjoyed most when we were using Quill in the classroom, are these 1 and 2 options, right? The more complex the ideas get, the more options, so you'll have up to 3 different top answers that people give. Now, when students first see this, they're going to get confused. They're going to say, oh, if I wrote you have a choice in the way you write the sentence. Neither one of these sentences is more correct. All this means is most people answer this way. This answer is more unique. A lot of times I've seen kids have really great discussions if they are maybe working on the same activity and they talk to each other, and that's part of the reason lessons are powerful. They can talk to each other about why they would write one sentence and not the other. So as a teacher, when I have students doing this as independent practice, I'm walking around, and whenever I catch them on this screen, I'm asking them questions. Which sentence did you write? Which one did you like better? If you were to write it again, would you write it more like the second one, the third one, or the first one? So this is a really great place for kids to start thinking about the idea that I have a choice in the sentences I write. Now, bats living in caves, this is not terribly complex. But if I go back and look at some of Quill's most complex sentences, you can say that here there are going to be a heck of a lot more options that students are going to see, and it's going to lead to a much more interesting thinking process for them about what choices they could make to build the strongest possible sentence. So overall with Quill Connect, what I find to be most effective is when you are having students really think about the choices that they're making. And you can have them do things like maybe if they're keeping a writer's notebook, or if you're doing an exit slip, you can have them write down the strongest sentence that they wrote. Or you can have them write down the best sentence they saw in the different options as they went, right? The more you can get them to think that priority 1 is to be correct, priority 2 is to write a strong sentence that reflects your own choices. Everybody with me still?
Yep, we're here.
Any questions?
Questions?
Nope. Would there ever be a time where you think the sentences might be read out loud?
The students might read the sentences out loud?
No, the website.
Oh, the sentences will be read out. Yeah, so this is a funny thing. Because students were copying and pasting, they've changed the ability to highlight these things. It used to be that we had a Google plugin that would read aloud those sentences to them. That is something, thank you for elevating that for me. I'm going to put that back in my notes here to read aloud option for sentences and instructions. I can't imagine, I obviously don't know the code side. It would be too terribly complicated to have a little speaker right next to it to have it read aloud to the students.
Yeah.
So I think that that's something that we've talked a lot about, and that's another thing that I'd love to hear your ideas on, right? Not only sort of what makes it easiest for you to assign, but also what sort of modifications you wish existed on Quill to support students with different learning needs. Okay, so the next thing on our list that we discussed was the advanced reporting. So let me find my advanced reports here. So as premium subscribers, you guys have access to some of the more advanced reporting. Let me walk you through them and then let you know that we are building out more advanced reports all the time. This is not a great example, I just realized, because I only have one student. Let me go to the demo. Okay, so if you look here at my class, you can see this is my visual overview. Let's go ahead and look at the list overview. Now, I call the list overview the nerd report, and that's because if you are a nerd like me, then this report is really exciting because you can download it as a CSV file and you can mess with it to your heart's content. So if you really like color coding spreadsheets like I do, this is a great way to go about that, right? So you can see every single student, every single assignment that they've completed, what their score was, what type of activity it was, and what the Common Core alignment is. Now, you may notice that, say you're working with 7th grade students, you're going to see that they're working on sometimes 2nd, 1st, or 3rd grade standards. Now, Quill aligns its material with the first standard where that information appears. But if you look at the standard itself, you're going to find that that's far more complex than something that they necessarily will have mastered in 1st grade. Plus, we know there are plenty of kids who are getting to 7th grade and there are basic grammar skills that they have never mastered, right? That's why you will see the standard, but students will never see the standard attached to their work. Choice on our part because we don't want students to be discouraged. I know plenty of adults that struggle with once since so that, and just because it's a 3rd grade standard doesn't mean we can't all practice it. So that's just a little, yes.
Sorry, I hate to interrupt you again, but I just wanted to point out, like, when I'm putting my grades in live grades, because they're all doing different activities, you know, I can't assign like one activity in live grades because they're all doing different things. So I use the dates right there in that date column, and I'll sort them by date. So they have to have so many activities completed by this date. So I'll take out of those activities, I'll take like the highest score that they get and give them that in live grades.
That's great. So so grading is a little trickier on Quill. I'll give you another option for how I would enter this in a grade book. Usually what I do is I think about Quill runs on sentences, right? So if you think about a 5-paragraph essay for a 7th grader would be about 5 sentences for every 5 paragraph, or for each paragraph, about 25 sentences, right? If we consider this by sentence here, the student Maya has done about 5 essays worth of sentences as she went, right? What that actually adds up to, we all know, is a little different per student. But what I would say is if you consider each activity has about 10 sentences, say I'm assigning 10 activities to my students, that's 100 sentences that I'm asking them to complete. Now, what I can say to myself is, by the end of, say, if you're doing this on a weekly basis, right, I'm assigning 2 activities, the max possible you could have is 20 correct sentences, right? So I'm going to say that every student with, it's going to be out of 20, and I'm just going to look at the number of correct sentences. Now, you could take the percentage here. Here's why I wouldn't. This tallies every sentence as they go. Even if from this point forward, Maya gets every single sentence correct, she's still going to have the 29 incorrect here affecting her overall percentage. So I would say in the first marking period, we're asking students to have 100 correct sentences. They can go back and redo activities as many times as it takes to get those correct sentences. So that could be their overall goal, right? My goal, Maya Angelou's goal, is to have 100 correct sentences. She has 98, so her grade is a 98 out of 100. So that's another way that I would do the grading on this. So now let's look at the concept report here. So let's go ahead and look at, I think Charles has one of the most interesting concept reports. Now, here what you can see is broken down by the actual concept, right? So we'll see adverbs of manner, right? We can see how many times Charles has practiced that skill and what his overall success rate is. Now, when I see 1 and 1, that's usually not a great indicator, right? They've tried it once. When I see 5 questions, I think that this is a better indicator, right? So when it comes to using the adjectives, this is something that Charles has not been doing a great job with, and I might want to check in with him on it, okay? If I go down, I can see, for example, in terms of compound subjects, Charles has had 12 opportunities to practice it and has mastered it 11 out of 12 times. So that's a skill where Charles is really excelling. A couple things to point out here. When it comes to spelling, because there are so many words, we don't mark spelling every time they get a word correct. We only mark it if it's incorrect. Students will always have a 0% for spelling because we're only counting the times they've gotten it wrong. However, out of all of the sentences that Charles has written, he's only made 5 spelling errors. So that's pretty great overall. Okay. So these concept reports can be an interesting way. I use these mainly for individual conferring with students, right? So if I sit down with Charles and I say, okay, Charles, let's look at this. I want you to pick one area where you feel like you're doing really well and one area where you think you could use a little support. Unfortunately, this is not a student-facing report yet, which is something that makes me very sad, but hopefully this will eventually be something where we can share that with students so that they can reflect on their own practices. The last of these Common Core, or of these advanced reports, is the Common Core. Are you guys a Common Core standards aligned school?
No.
No? Okay. So the reason these reports are most important is just so that you can see what exactly the focus is, right? So this 2.1F skill is producing, expanding, and rearranging complete, simple, and compound sentences. You can see why, even though this is technically a second grade skill, this is something we're looking at all the way throughout student learning. But what I can see is when it comes to this skill particularly, how are my students doing overall? That's interesting. Usually the standard appears there. But I could see, so in terms of rearranging sentences, most of my students are doing pretty well. Shakespeare could probably use a little extra help on that. So that's something that I can look at here. This is also something where if you're looking at an individual student, I've seen a lot of people use this, and I'll show you one other report. If you're dealing with a student who has high learning needs, right? So someone who has an IEP, or maybe there's a little bit more conversation with home about how they're doing. This is a great way to look overall and say, okay, so in terms of the work the student is doing, I can download this report and share that this student is struggling in 3 of these areas. This is interesting. That should be proficient. Sometimes the demo account isn't always right on. Another way for you to look at, say, a student who you know is struggling and you're not entirely sure what's going on is to do an activity analysis, right? So let's go back to my visual overview and let's say, okay, so Charles is really struggling. He's got a couple where I'm really worried about his work. So I just clicked on the after, although, and since, and I'm looking at his answers. What I can do here is I can actually see what he submitted for each question, so I can see how he got them wrong, right? So after was the word we were looking for, got the comma in the right place, but he just put the after in the wrong place, right? So when we were looking here, so this is something I'm noticing as a theme, he's just sort of tossing that word in the wrong place. So that's now a conversation I can have with Charles. Now, you all are very busy people, so I expect that you will not do the activity analysis for every activity for every student. But if you have particular concerns about a student, this is a great way to figure out where they're struggling so that you can have a conversation with them about that. So those are sort of the big things that I would think about in terms of the reporting. Any questions there?
No. Oh.
The last area to look at here would be sort of, we're going a little backwards here, but the diagnostic. Is there anyone in the room who has assigned the diagnostic?
Who has?
Yes.
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
Yeah, I think most of us have, maybe. At least half.
Great. Beautiful. So you know when you assign the diagnostic, you're going to get a series of recommendations that are individualized by students. If you didn't already know, you don't have to assign all the packs if you don't want to. You can also choose packs that haven't necessarily been selected. People ask a lot, why is it just 7 activity packs? And the reason is these are basically what we consider to be the required work on Quill, right? You will not have all the skills you need to effectively combine sentences unless you complete these 8 activity packs. After you've completed these 8, you should be able to have all the tools you need to address, say, the Patrick Henry question, where there are 4 different sentences that you're combining in different ways, right? So you can see that Maya Angelou here has only one area in which she really needs to work to master those required things, whereas William Shakespeare has 4 areas in which he needs a little support. The other thing that I think folks sometimes miss that I just want to highlight are these collaborative lesson recommendations. You can see that every student needs help with complex sentences, and most of the students need help with compound sentences. Now, something to pay attention to, these are in backwards order, right? Because they change them based on how much students need them. So if I look up here, complex sentences is almost near the last pack that we would assign to students. This is sort of the order in which we'd work through them. So I'm going to look at compound subjects, objects, and predicates, right? And I'm going to look here first, right? So these are lessons that I know 20% of my students need. So I might work with a small group of students on this, right? If I look up here, that's just Charles. It's a 5-person class. I might work with him on those lessons and not with other students. Then I might go on to the parallel structure, and it looks like these are my students who need support there. So diagnostic, once again, is a recommendation, and it focuses on required skills students need to be able to effectively combine any sentence. From there, you have the opportunity to choose out other featured activity packs, and you can look at some of our more content-based work, which we're really excited about, and we're releasing more and more on basically every other week. We're releasing a new one of these content-based activity packs. So let me just show you. These are the ones that show up usually in red because they're higher level skills, but these are really content-based, right? We know people don't learn in a vacuum. So any Quill activity, even the BATS one, is going to teach students a little bit of content. These are really going to focus on one idea, right? So this is all about different Chinese dynasties. So every sentence they work on, every proofreading activity, everything that they do is going to focus and share information about this topic. So when I'm having students do Quill activities, even if we're not on the historical packs yet, I have them answer 2 questions at the end of the period. What is the skill that you practiced? And what is some information that you learned? Questions?
I have a question. When you go to assign some activities, it wants you to title the activities, and that just confuses me because it's already got a title.
Yeah, so it is a little funny, and it's right now the main reason that they make you give it a title when you do it is because you can't assign individual activities from here. You have to assign a pack, right? So say that I want to put together a pack of different grammar activities, and I'm focusing all on verbs, right? So I'm going to focus on first grade or standard first grade verbs, right? So I'm going to make a pack that has a few of these activities in it, okay? When I get down here, these are the activities I'm assigning, or say I'm just assigning one. This is why I have to give it a name. And you can just, if you're like me, you can highlight, copy and paste, and make that the title of your pack. But it's because you have to assign it as a pack. If you look back at my activities, you'll see that nothing is assigned on its own. Everything is assigned as a pack.
Okay.
Other questions? All right, so it's 2:18. I ran a little longer than I said I would. I'm going to hang out here for the next couple of minutes until you guys, anyone has any questions left, but I do want to be respectful and make sure you have the time to do anything else you need to do. If you'd like to, please feel free to write an email to me. You can do it right now. You can do it later. Just say, hi, I'm so-and-so from Mountaineer, and here's something I really think Quill should have. Here's something I'm really excited to try. Here's a question that I have after what you've shared with us today. Okay. And thank you guys so much for using Quill. We are a 9-person organization, so your feedback is essential in building our site. Please make sure that if you notice any errors or glitches, you just take a screenshot of them and send them our way. Because we are 9 people, we don't have the opportunity to go through and fine-tooth comb everything every day. So you being able to report back to us your experience is essential in us strengthening that experience for all the folks using our tool nationwide.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I like it. I'm going to use it more than. So all the times the kids were telling me, it's not working right. I don't know how to, it's because they're making mistakes and it won't let them go on.
Yeah.
They're getting
Probably
frustrated.
capitalization punctuation.
Yeah, they're getting frustrated.
What's this? Do we have to go back to the